Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of The Archive, where we strive to tell interesting LARP stories and preserve LARP history. I'm St. Godric, and today I have Warlord Sir Raven joining me. How you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing good, sir. How are you doing?
Doing good. So, viewers, we are doing something a little different. We are live streaming this at the same time. This is a first, so hopefully technology will work for us and we won't have any issues. Feel free on whatever platform you're on to type in questions as we go. It will let me pull your questions up on screen for Sir Raven. And so we will get your input as we go throughout the show. And I think that'll be a pretty interesting and unique thing. Fingers crossed, technology works. Sir Raven, let's get to it. What got you into LARPing? What was the thing that kind of hooked you into the game? What game was it?
So I started out playing Amtgard. But before I ever played Amtgard, I think I was like 12, almost 13 years old. And I was with my buddy skateboarding, and we walked by the local park in Bellefontaine, Ohio. And we saw this guy with a giant warhammer hit this little kid who was precisely 1 year younger than me. He was my brother Xavier. He was 11, and he had this red boogie board shield covered in red fabric. And the guy with the warhammer is actually his dad. And he just overhands, just smashes this kid into the dirt. And it hit his shield first. It didn't hit him. And just smashed him in the dirt. And I was like, this is probably the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I think I had just come off of seeing like Lord of the Rings and like the 13th Warrior. And I was like, I got to do this. And then I just started LARPing after that, pretty much.
So Amtgard was your first. How old were you at the time?
It's probably 12 or 13, 12 I think. 13? Yeah.
So any nerdy hobbies before that, like magic or anything? Like was LARP the first foray into the nerd world for you, or was it a fairly obvious next step?
I think that was the first thing I did, and then right around that same time, I also started playing Magic the Gathering and playing the miniatures game Mage Knight. Remember, it's like kind of like HeroClix, okay. But it's a medieval themed version of HeroClix, basically. And I started doing all that about the same time. I think it was right after I saw Lord of the Rings, actually.
That's pretty cool. So early park days for you. You said it was the combat that hooked you, and I'm assuming because the Warlord and Sir in front of it, that's what got you to stay.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think Amtgard is really, 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 really fun. I've played quite a few sports in my life. Like I did skateboarding, I've done snowboarding, I played soccer, stuff like that. And I got hooked really playing Amtgard because it's just super fun. Our early park days, since we're all like, so our original park, this is kind of fun for context of like the history of the Rising Winds and stuff like that. Our park consisted of a bunch of kids who are anywhere from 13 to like 15. As our park was called the Iron Dragon Clan, and we are known for all playing monks and assassins and throwing projectiles at people because we didn't know how to fight and we couldn't fight adults very well, so we just threw projectiles at them. So our normal park day was like, I think the first time I ever actually played Amtgard, I showed up to the park like, yeah, show up around noon. And like I was a kid, I'm like, I don't really know what noon is. So I showed up at like 10:30 and just waited for like an hour and a half. And it was like noon. I'm like, I don't think anyone's coming. And I was like getting ready to leave. And then everyone started showing up in the back of Sir Rigger's blue Chevy truck. And there's like 14 people in the back of his truck. And they all show up to start playing Amtgard. And Garb wasn't super great back then. I think I showed up in a Kung Fu gi. And
hey, that's better than most first timers.
And I think I had a sword made out of a table leg. Actually, I'm pretty sure it was made out of a table leg now I think about it. And our park days were pretty cool. Like we would, I really actually miss our park days just because it was like we would ditch for like 30 to 45 minutes and then we play our first battle game. And usually that was a quest of some type because we're all back in the day. We had the monster manual, and that was really prevalent as a thing that people would do. So people would either start playing monsters or we'd kind of organize some type of adventure or quest or whatever. And we do the quest, and then the quest would get over, and then we do a bunch more ditching, and then we play another battle game, and then we do a bunch more ditching and play another battle game. And for having only played, I think we only played Capture the Flag, and during V6, where everyone had like limited life pools, and it wasn't very fun to play a martial class. We really enjoyed just running around throwing socks at each other, basically.
That's one of the things that's kind of interesting, because I started in V7 and quests were a regular part of our park days. And then I don't know if it's because of V8 or if that just happened to be around the time. Questing is almost gone. Like the parks that are questing are really pushing for it hard, but it doesn't seem to be as prevalent as what it was in previous editions.
I can't quite put my finger on exactly why that may be. I'm part of it as I think it might be the role that the monarch has taken recently and like how that's evolved over time. Because back in the day, it was if you're your park monarch, you're basically like the DM for the park. And they would organize quests. They would approve whether or not people could play monsters. They would approve whether or not people could, use relics and magic items and stuff like that. And I think it was a general expectation of them that they were kind of responsible for like coming up like, hey, what's the campaign for the next 6 months? And their parks would do quests and stuff like that. And like Monster Garb wasn't particularly like immaculate back in the day either. People just really enjoyed playing monsters. Like it would be pretty regular that you'd have a new player show up to the park and like, oh yeah, I already saw your rule book and I saw this other rule book. Can I play Hill Giant today? Yeah. And for the most part, no one would care. They're like, yeah, you can play Hill Giant or a Goblin or whatever. And there would always be like one guy at your park who only played Goblin. And maybe that was just a Midwest thing where like people are kind of silly and like playing Goblins. But like I talked to Texans down here and they did the exact same thing. So I'm just going to kind of guess it's just kind of how the position of leadership has changed over time.
I think probably a little bit of the rule book as well, because at least in V7, there were like, what was the spell that someone had to tell you the truth? Yeah, and like you had a lot of spells that were focused on quests, where in V8 there just aren't any. Yeah,
and I guess that was supported in the main book, and like it's not like how it is now in V8 where there's a particular section of the rulebook for like, hey, this stuff is for quests. I mean, things that were related to quests were directly in the writing for all the classes, like not just like truth spells and stuff like that, but like if you're playing a wizard, it said it like, here's how you play wizard. You can use, here's your weapon list. And it'd be like, you can use this, buy a short sword, or you can buy an iron golem, or you can buy a fire golem or an elemental or something like that. So that was kind of embedded in all the language of V6 and V7. So maybe it's just with the transference of V8 that like people don't think about it as much anymore. Yeah,
I know. When I first started in 2011, we had monthly quests, and I remember like vividly someone being a dragon for the first time and seeing the fly and the wind spells, or the fly ability and the wind spell, and that just blew me away. And then I went to college, and I came back, and V8 had come out, and then I didn't do a quest except for like night quests at events. But like at a local level, I didn't really see it too much. But now it seems to be kind of a resurgence. I've seen a few parks put some emphasis, like we're doing it once a month. I've seen a couple of other events that are popping up that are specifically 100% quest driven. And I like that. I think it's cool to see it kind of come back to that.
Yeah. One thing that kind of sucks about the current environment with V8 and how like people don't really do quests anymore, because quests were almost emphasized in V7. Like it was almost a regular thing. It kind of created this like this shared experience that all the players kind of have, and I think it really gave the game the identifier of being a swords and sorceries medieval themed game. And now it's kind of like it can be whatever you want, which is kind of honestly kind of shitty for a game.
Yeah,
but but I don't know. Maybe another component is like V7 and V6, I think, were played for like 25 years or something like that. And then V8 came out and was pretty different. And I think maybe that just changed the way it was structured. Players were like, yeah, let's be more like PvP oriented.
Well, I think this goes back. One of the main shifts from V7 to V8 was just the life differences, the 5 lives compared to unlimited lives. And I think that the limited lives plays more into questing just because your lives matter. And now on the other side, I love unlimited lives for large scale battle games. Like I love that compared at events compared to like only having 4 lives as a wizard or whatever it used to be. But there's definitely a difference. Like you play the game differently if you have limited lives.
Yeah, I actually think that specific difference plays an actual larger role in the development of players than we think it does. I know Tony and I had talked about this as soon as V8 came out. It was like me, Tony, Smurf. It was actually after the first Phoenix League tournament in Columbus. We're at a Chipotle afterwards, and we're talking about why people are bad at team fighting. And one of the things that seriously, like we're talking about, one of the things was that going from, if you're playing a barbarian, you actually started out with 3 lives instead of 4 because you had -1 life because you got berserk. Starting out with 3 lives means you only got to play for 3 times in that battle game, and you actually had to use teamwork to survive and do other things. And you had to use teamwork to complete an objective because if you just went out 1-on-1, eventually you'd be shattered. And your team would eventually lose. Yeah. Now in V8, I mean, we have unlimited lives for most of the game designs, and that's kind of better for like a game being like football or lacrosse or actual like mundane games, right? Having unlimited lives is better for that, but I don't know if it creates a better shared experience. I don't know. And like, if I was thinking about like other types of games that we play in the mundane world, like shooters, adventure games, anything like that, you pretty much have unlimited lives so that mundane people can engage in Amtgard a little bit easier. But man, having 5 lives, like even newbies, when they came to the field, like I saw my class gets 3 lives a day. I'm going to team up with some people. And that actually kind of immediately brought that person into your community and just made it easier for them to integrate themselves.
For sure. And I think part of the issue, people identified the lives were an issue and the timers on spells were an issue. So they went away with both of them. And I feel like maybe they just went a little too far. Because I understand ice ball being dead for 5 minutes or being out of game for 5 minutes
long enough to smoke a cigarette
was rough. But I do like when I watch some of the Euro Larp videos on YouTube, or I see other different games and different systems, and they're like, when my character dies, it is a huge deal. I have put 2 years into this character, and if I die once, I have to it rocks their world. And then I compare that to Amtgard, where I die 50 times a day. Like I am going to be more invested in that character if when I die, I am forced to create a new character, new persona, new costume, new everything. So it's interesting to see the differences there.
I guess also one thing about going back to character deaths, I remember specifically in V6, V7 when we had the monsters thing. I remember we would role play it pretty often, even at Kingdom events, where like your character when you played like a battle game it wasn't quite your character. It was like, I'm a 6th level scout. But when you did quests, like for example, I'm not a 6th level scout anymore. I'm Raven the Swift, the 6th level ranger scout, right? And actually certain monsters would, if I got shattered by a vampire, by the quest rules, I'm now a vampire, right? So then I actually take that on as my character. Yeah. And that carries on to like other quests and stuff like that. So like, that kind of also creates this contiguous character development, and it's just something we completely lack. Like even if you had a quest right now, like you wouldn't take anything from that quest, and that's just another form of battle game to most players. Like trying to explain to players where I'm like, back in the day, I was a 6th level scout, I was a drow, I was a vampire and a werewolf at the same time. like, what? That sounds crazy. Like, yeah. And like I have stories from that, and like now players really remember. Like I did this cool thing in a battle game once. I'm like, yeah, but did you let a Nosferatu kill you at an event and then resurrect, and then turn you into a vampire, and then he gave you 4 stone skins and a flame blade, and he went and did some cool stuff with a Nosferatu and his cool buddy? Probably not. But is there stuff like that? Like I don't think that stuff doesn't happen anymore. So it kind of you don't get this upper like minutia of fun stuff that you really get out of that makes the game seem more of a LARP rather than a field game.
I agree. I think for players who have only played V8, which is almost 10 years now, which is crazy for me to think about.
I think it came out in 2013.
Yeah. It really was a drastic shift. Like we can't overstate. It was pretty much like you were playing a new game. And a lot of that is good, right? It's fun. It's whenever a new edition comes out, we really enjoy learning the new edition and figuring out how to optimize it. And like, it was a good time, but it was like as different as me going to play Dagger here now compared from V7 to V8. It was a massive shift.
Yeah. It was actually like, I think of a good example is V7.7 was like playing 3.5 D&D, and playing V8 is a lot like playing 4th edition D&D. And we know how everyone feels about 4th edition D&D.
And they came out pretty much the same time too. Like roughly it was, and I feel like a lot of the same mentality went into both, making it more accessible to a wider audience, making it to where it's, I don't want to call it dumbed down because our rule book is still overly complicated in certain things. But they took away a lot of stuff and added a lot of stuff. And there's a bunch in V8 I love and I hope sticks around. Yeah. But I do hope they bring back the life count and some of the other stuff from V7.
So I think, so when V8 came out, I was a part of the playtesting thing for that. And I think Columbus, the park I played at the time, was I was at VTR, Valley of the Twin Rivers in Springfield. We were the first park in the kingdom to actually start playtesting it because I'm like, hey guys, let's playtest this stuff. And that's my train of thought. And so basically the game was designed from the way that Western Amtgard played Amtgard and not the way Eastern Amtgard played Amtgard. Like I would say Tal'Dagor, the Rising Winds, Crystal Groves, and Golden Vale play the game completely differently than the way the Western Amtgard played the game. A lot of that just has to do with kind of like the older culture. I think some of that excited youngness didn't really exist in the Western Amtgard at the time. And out on the East Coast, Midwest East Coast area, we're still very young and we were very, gung ho and happy and shiny about playing Amtgard. So we still did those things. And I think when they designed V8, I can just tell you right away, like Brennan basically designed the back end of how the rulebook was going to work and like how it worked as a system. I mean, the guy's pretty good at making games and like, sure, this makes sense actually. And then he had some people Ben Glicker. Forget his persona name.
Randall.
Sir Randall, and a bunch of those guys in like Colorado and New Mexico. Those guys added in the flavorful elements to the rulebook. Where like he added in the quest abilities and stuff like that, and like all the little flavorful things like bard songs and stuff like that to overlay on top of the structural system of how the rulebook worked. So the rulebook is very reflective of the personalities in that kind of way. And unfortunately, it's like on paper, if you looked at the rulebook, you're like, man, you could really play Amtgard any way you wanted to. Unfortunately, it goes, man, you could play Amtgard any way you wanted to and doesn't actually tell you how to play the game or gives you any kind of real direction, which kind of, I think we lost that. We lost a little bit of our LARPness when we went to V8.
I agree.
We became more of a battle game. We became more like Dagger here, which nothing is Dagger here. That game's super fun. Yeah. But we became more simple.
Yeah, I agree. And I really enjoy and appreciate the way that Wonjo and the V9 committee is going about doing all the polls, and they're getting the insight from all the kingdoms, from all the games as they start to make these rules. And I'm pretty excited to see what they come up with. Yeah.
Having worked with Wonjo and some of those guys before on a first iteration of V9, I'm really excited for whatever they produce. And my personal things I feel is a little long-winded and it's a lot of effort, but I do appreciate that they're taking the effort to do those things. Like no normal person is going to take that much effort to do those types of things. And it's pretty awesome that they're doing it.
Yeah, I agree.
Having some of those guys like Manimal in the project, I think is going to be phenomenal. It's going to be, Craig could not do anything wrong for the most part.
So you mentioned Dagger here. You had played that before. You started in Amtgard. What other games have you branched out to? And maybe not like just tried, but like ones that you've played more than just a few times. What other games do you play?
Does it count if I've done demos at Gen Con for Nero?
Sure.
Okay, so so I've been to Gen Con. I've played Nero. I've played Nero at Origins in Columbus, and those were both super fun experiences for me. The way they set up their demo or whatever, they use really simplistic tools to create a really cool quest experience. And I was like, dude, I want to start bringing that stuff back to Amtgard.
Yeah.
Like one thing that they did was every single person who was a monster just wore a brown tabard. And then there's like, oh, that's a monster. And they put a goblin mask on and just pretend to be goblins. I'm like, that's a really easy way to like engage your players without much effort. They had stuff for like they had hallways with tarps and PVC rod that didn't fall down. And I'm like, that's just stuff like that. That made it really easy. Yeah. And like the way they set up their puzzles at their demo was really easy. And like they had a guide the whole time. It was like, I'm going to be your adventure guide. And they would like basically work you through this quest experience. And it was super fun. So playing Nero was really great.
How's the combat? Because that's my biggest thing that I have heard is that there is no combat. Is that it's all dice or it's all... Explain that to me.
So I've never actually played at a pay-to-play Nero experience, but doing the demos, it was fine. I mean, they look like they scaled up the combat based on how much combat you actually wanted. I mean, to my knowledge, I don't know if Nero still exists in the US. I know there's a bunch of other like Neros, or it's basically Nero with a different skin on top of it in different parts of the world, different parts of the country have different names and stuff like that. I can't imagine having a ton of combat. But the combat was fine for the most part.
That's cool. I want to try one of the Nero or Nero adjacent games. I have just never really had any close to me. And it's like one of those that's like, I don't know if I'll play it weekly or monthly or whenever but I want to go try it, you know?
Yeah. So I work with someone who, my boss at the Combat Academy is Shannon Lind. And they own Dystopia Rising Texas. And I talked to them a lot about creating like player experiences and stuff like that. And thinking about how a pay-to-play LARP actually works versus a free-to-play LARP.
It's massive.
If I was like, man, I'm going to go to a pay-to-play LARP and I was going to actually spend my time, which is time's different, has a different value to everybody. But like, if you really value your time, like that's basically going on vacation. I don't think I'd actually go to Nero. I'd probably go to what's it called? Beekleen up in Canada. I'm like, I'm there.
Sick. Like I would almost like I've been trying for years to convince my wife to let Beekleen be our vacation. Like she doesn't even got to go and play. Like we're going to get a medieval, like a real legit tent. And we are going to be in this village for 10 days. Like that's our vacation. She hasn't let me do it yet, but even something along the lines of like going to Rackus or Gulf War or something like that. I think that actually is it's a free to play LARP basically, but that creates a better experience, I think, than probably Nero probably does. Just because it's player investment. Like everyone who's going to Beekleen's like, this is basically like going to Disney World for me. So I'm going to spend 10 grand on this vacation. And everyone there is kind of imbibing in this, participating in this experience. And yeah, if I had to choose something, I'd just go to Beekleen or something like that. For those who aren't familiar, Beekleen is up in Canada, and it's something like 150 acres. They have 2 full medieval towns with, I think it's a decade or more of history at this point.
It's huge.
And they actually sell deeds. And so your fighting company, your store,
that's
or
right.
whatever,
you can buy a building.
Or you can buy the spot, and you can build your own building, but they have very strict guides on how it can look. And so this has naturally and organically spread out. So it is a pay to play game, and it's pretty expensive to get to. But when you get there, you're on 150 acres with legit 2 full medieval villages that are functioning with thousands of people. And then it's a latex game, but it is a fairly combat heavy latex for the latex games.
Yeah.
It looks sick.
Looking at it, it actually looked like a hybrid of like Darkon Dagahir with some latex weapon aspects to it. Because I saw someone with a spear and I was like, that's a Gorg spear. Yeah. So they have to be stabbing each other pretty hard, I guess. I'm sure there's probably something of like the players get to decide on how heavy of combat they want to engage in. I'm sure there's some aspect to that.
Yeah.
You're going to have those types of players doing a LARP experience. But yeah,
the only downside is most of the quests and most of the people, it's in French. And so they do have a lot of English translators and whatnot, but all of the quest stuff and the RP and the narrative stuff that is coming from the event, which is you're paying for, is in French. So, Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. I was just trying to think about if it was still worth the go. I'm like, I could learn French, I guess, but I probably would just be there to look at people and like,
yeah, dude, I just want to go and I just want to go and spend a vacation. Like that would be so fun.
Yeah, you could play whatever character you want. You don't even have to like do any of the quests. You could be like some merchant or something like that.
Yep.
I just have to imagine that's like the Ren Fair on steroids.
It's the Ren Fair that you get to camp at for a week.
Yeah.
Like that's awesome.
Or at least want to camp at for a week. I don't know if I'd want to camp at the Ren Fair. But Beakling looks sick as far as like those a more high end LARP I'd want to try out. There's some other stuff too. Like there's an amusement park in Utah that does it's like the Dark Moon Fair and WoW, but it's in Utah. And I don't remember what it's called. But they're open during October and they look pretty cool. Yeah. But as far as other LARPs, I think I've only tried Dagger here twice. I want to try it some more because it's really fun. I like the way those players engage in the theme of their game without having any system to actually engage in. But it's crazy because like it's this weird social rule. Like everyone here, for the most part, has to like wear cool garb. The game doesn't really make them do it because there's not really a game. It's just like a 1-page rule book of like, here's what we do. We hit each other with foam swords. And then just as a social thing, everyone engages in this. Everyone wears cool garb and goes super extra with their garb. One of
the things I like about the DAG rulebook, they actually have 3 pictures in their rulebook of what garb standards are. And so they have a not acceptable, a minimum, and a preferred in their rulebook.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. And I like that because it gives players a visual. Because in our rulebook, it's what is it? What's the wording? Sword and sorcery.
So
I like it.
So a while ago, I was talking to I think it might have been Randall. It might have been the other guy who plays a ranger who's from Utah. I was talking to them about like garb in Amtgard. I'm like, hey, do you guys know you guys didn't mention anywhere in the rulebook that you have to wear garb except for in classes? Like, no, it's somewhere else, surely. And I'm like, no, just in classes. It says every single class says you have to dress like a sword and sorceries / medieval character. But like, it's not in the beginning of the book where it shows you how to play Amtgard. It's like, 50 pages in the rulebook where it tells you, and it doesn't even describe what that is.
Yeah, they don't give you any examples of what that is.
Yeah, and I think it was an oversight, hoping that players would take, the best. This is the intention of this rule, and just have hoping that players would assume that's what it meant. But really, you kind of need like a more codified thing of what that actually is.
I do agree with your point though, with that DAG has such. The culture of Dagger here is in Belgar to an extent is shaped in a way that is not rulebook centric, which is really interesting coming from Amtgard, which our culture is very rulebook centric. And so, for instance, they don't have the ladder awards to help promote the things that they want to see. But yet I would say their average garb is significantly better than Amtgard's, even though they don't have the Serpent Knights. They don't have the ladder awards. Like, it's a super interesting dynamic.
Yeah, even stuff like their knighthood has no codified thing to what that is. It's like, well, my knight said I had to do this stuff, so he would knight me. And it's generally the same stuff. Like, give back to the game in a meaningful way. And then like any Dagger here knight that I meet, I'm like, that dude would be a good knight in Amtgard for the most part. Like, they may not be achieving the same things on a masterhood level, perhaps, maybe. But they are contributing back to the community in a meaningful way, and the community still recognizes them the same way that they would before. So there's some really cool things I like about Dagger here. Like, the first time I heard that there was a Brotherhood of the Blade, the guys who used red swords, I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I was like, yeah, we get together at Ragnarok every year, and we have a trial to see who's going to be the leader of our thing or whatever. And I'm like, that's way cooler than anything I've ever experienced at Amtgard as far as like a household thing.
Yeah.
That's even deeper than almost any fighting company that I've ever seen in Amtgard doesn't do that. Unfortunately.
The Dragoons in Indianapolis. So their trial is the person has to fight a baby dragon, which is one person, and then like the wormling, which is a sword and a shield, and then they have to fight the full grown dragon, which is like, I don't know, 4 people with one with a pole, 2 shields and a flow or whatever. And so like, and you get as many tries as you want, but like to get into their company, they have this big long, and it's this thing because like we go and I'm not a part of them, but we're at O's every year. They're like, all right, Dragoon trials are going to be in an hour, and like literally the whole group or the whole event goes and circles up around their camp and just watches these guys slay the dragons for 2 hours. Like it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really awesome. We actually try to do I actually have some stuff like that in my own fighting company that I'm trying to do. It's just a lot. I think I made a little bit too much than it needed to be. But yeah. And Dagger here is just really cool, man. Like everyone I talk to about Dagger here, I'm like, man, they got really cool garb. And there's going to be someone that I know and one of my immediate friends. They're like, yeah, but you still got guys wearing like cut off sweatpants and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Like I see pictures of people in Dagger here. I'm like, they have garb on, and like it looks really rad. The pictures you get from Amtgard aren't like super great.
Well, and you still get the people who aren't at the garb standard that, you know, we would like them to be, but that they're 2 out of 10 and not 4 out of 10 or 6 out of 10 like they are in Amtgard.
Yeah. And like, I feel like the garb in Dagger here is generally more medieval swords and sorceries themed than Amtgard garb is.
I agree.
I'm not a huge fan of what people do with their Amtgard garb in general because it detracts from the shared experience that we have.
You don't you don't like the Pokemon costumes?
And it's not, I love Pokemon. I even have a tunic with the flash symbol on it.
I know you do.
And I would prefer that symbol not to be on it. And the reason is like, everyone's like, what do you hate about My Little Pony? I'm like, I don't actually care about My Little Pony. But the issue I have is when someone comes to play a LARP and they go, okay, I'm going to go play the Swords and Sorceries LARP. They have this expectation in their mind of when they go to the Amtgard field. And they're like, this is going to be the coolest thing in the world. And they show up and someone's wearing a My Little Pony or Magic School Bus pattern tunic and pants. And they're like, oh, cool, I'm going to go home.
Yeah. Well, in Dagbell, they really lean heavy on the Lord of the Rings aesthetic. And they can't use that because of trademark stuff, but their game is centered around Lord of the Rings, where Amtgard has gone broader to try and include more people and broader interests and whatnot. But that, I feel like that has hurt us because for them, they like watch this movie, make a costume that would fit in this movie. That is their goal. Where Amtgard's goal is we want to be accessible to as many different people with as many different interests. And I get it. Both are respectable goals. It's just, you know, it's just different approaches to the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, like, I would like to look at what the numbers look like right now for like what Dagger, Belagarth, Hearthlight look like. Hearthlight is another LARP that I would like to try because it looks really cool.
It looks sick.
I just haven't got to try it out yet. But
we got a comment here for you that I thought was pretty funny.
Oh, okay, from Yuri. To be fair, some of those fabrics are really cheap. I guess.
Good point. Good point.
like linen on Black Friday is like $2. It's really cheap. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like, I think at my poorest as an adult, I actually didn't wear garb at that time because I didn't want to. But when I did, I still had like pretty medieval garb-ish. I got better over time just because that's something I think that we should be doing.
I agree.
Amtgard's already went through its slope. It's a thing of like, look like an athlete thing. And now it's like, look like a goober. And it's kind of hoping to come up and do this for like medieval stuff because it's just kind of cyclical and like what its themes and stuff are. Like looking back at like 80s Amtgard, that shit looked dumb. And like everyone's like, we're just like Conan the Barbarian, but with pleather. And it looked awful. And it's just, it's funny thing about
swords that were that big.
Yeah, they look stupid. I would never play that game. Even looking at SCA from back in the 80s, I'm like, this looks bad, super bad. But I think Amtgard's starting to get a little bit better, especially with like a lot of people probably won't like that I'm going to say this, but like the guys like Brennan and Peter basically started wearing linen garb, and then people started wearing linen garb after that.
Yep.
And even Declan in the Rising Winds, he was one of the first people I knew to wear linen, and everyone's like, linen looks really rad. Let's start wearing that. And like even down here, it's really weird because you would think like what the physical properties of linen are like it dries sweat really easily, which would make you think like that's pretty great in a hot climate, right? And we in the Midwest, you're like, it doesn't get that hot. We probably don't actually need that, but it's pretty good still.
Yeah.
I came down to Texas in like the first year I was here. I was talking to one of my buddies, Sir Kestrel, and I had a linen tunic on, and I was like, dude, you got to upgrade. He had like a duck cloth tunic on. I was like, you need to upgrade your shit, dude. And he's like, why? What's wrong with this? I'm like, I can't explain to you how much better linen is. Just go get a linen tunic and then tell me how great it is next week. And someone made him a linen tunic for his warlording, and he was fighting all day at his warlording event. And he's like, dude, this is the best decision I ever made for garb. I'm like, I know, it's great. I don't understand why people won't do it.
Well, and I've been recently trying to get into the SEA more and more, and I'm looking at like linen is expensive, and linen scared me when I was first getting into it. But now I'm looking at wool. Man, linen's nothing. Like wool's like $30 a yard for like a real wool that I want to use and not just moving blanket fabric. Like,
and like I'm sure it has something to do with like Amtgarders are generally encouraged to like make their own stuff because you get awards for that. And no person, this is me especially, no person wants to make something, get halfway for their project, and then it just is they messed up their sewing project or something and they're pissed. Yeah. It's the same reason I didn't do garbing for the longest time, except for like the year right before the pandemic where I was like, I'm gonna get into garbing and I'm learning how to garb. And then I paid money for linen and stuff, made my project, and I was like, I'm gonna be so upset if this gets messed up. It was fine. I was just fine.
Yeah. And for me, it just got to the point where I was paying Declan so much money every year to make me stuff. I'm like, man, I'm just going to learn to do this on my own. And I went to, I went to Hobby Lobby, went to their bargain bin and made 3 tunics out of 50 cent a yard fabric to figure out my pattern. And then once I was comfortable, went to linen, and it's not as good as Declan's yet. But I'm not ashamed to wear my stuff anymore. Yeah. You know what I mean?
It's even stuff like, I think it's because people think too much in Walmart terms. They're like, well, I can't get linen. You're like, well, you don't have to go to linen. You can go to the thrift store. The thrift store has really cool patterned textiles and stuff like that. Like I've made garb out of just whatever I found at the thrift store. And that was pretty cool. And like linen is kind of cool, but like anything that doesn't look like duck cloth or like basically just duck cloth and like cotton, that you're pretty much gonna be fine. Like if you make something out of muslin's pretty cheap.
I've been looking. So the Goodwill, the shop online, like there, it's kind of like an eBay. You can bid stuff out. They've got tons of furs in there for almost nothing. Like you can get, it's old lady like mink and like, all this, you know what I'm talking about? Like, and
yeah, for sure.
And you can make that work for a lot of characters, or you can tear it apart and make cooler stuff there too. They've got linen shower curtains and linen window drapes and stuff that you can get on there for nothing.
Yeah.
If you want to practice stuff, you can find fabric to do.
Yeah, you got to be a little ingenuitive. I think that's the right word.
Yeah, I think it is. So tell me about the other games you play. DAG a little bit.
I've gone to DAG twice. Those were both great experiences just for like having fun and fighting people. Did a little bit of Nero. Just played a lot of Amtgard, and then recently I got into armor combat fighting, which is really fun. Kind of intimidating if you're new if you're new, and after a while you're like, this is fine.
So for the armored combat, is there any like, I don't know, culture around it, like events, or is it mainly more like the sport aspect of it? Like, do they have an event where you can camp and everyone's in garb outside of fighting, or is it mainly just the fighting?
So it's a little bit of both. In Russia and the Ukraine, this armored combat started at Renaissance fairs and stuff like that, because those things are heavily encouraged in their culture. And that's like, I mean, they lived in the medieval times. Like that's what their culture is. So when they do it, it's like straight up reenactment for them. Like they're very legit about the armor they wear. When they're adding a thing, it's because it started at Renaissance fairs. Everyone had made garb and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of a LARP element to it that a lot of people who do the sport are like, I don't LARP, and you're like, but you kind of do. For them, it's very much like they do reenactment and stuff like that. And then a lot of guys actually in Europe, a lot of them do LARPing and went from LARPing to armored combat because they wanted to experience that more realistically. And in the US, it's a little bit divided, and like that there are definitely people, especially people who came from the SCA and started doing armored combat, that they wanted to get into something more hardcore than SCA, or like maybe they had fun in SCA and they want to go do this other thing, and they do that a lot. And then there's other people who just want to play the sport, but also kind of like engaging in those LARP-like elements, and there's no resistance to it. If you're like, hey guys, we're having a demo at this Ren Fair, everyone's encouraged to wear garb afterwards. A lot of people are like, cool, got it, and they just buy garb. Yeah. They're like, this is really fun for me because they are engaging in that fun. For them, they're at the Ren Fair. They're like, I love the Ren Fair. Yeah, they're just doing it. As far as like events and stuff, I'd say about half the events. Well, the events are kind of broken up like this. You will probably most people or groups do demos at Ren Fairs. A lot of them do. Like there's a group, the Cincinnati Barbarians, there's a Marion team in Ohio, the Louisville team. All those guys do armor combat at the Ren Fair, the Ohio Ren Fair, and that's one aspect that they do. Other teams go to like throwing axe events or brewery houses and stuff like that, and they put on a show. There's quite a few groups that do shows basically where they're kind of putting on a medieval show and stuff like that.
Do they get paid to do that? I'm assuming
a lot of times they do. Yeah,
cool. That's neat. That's cool.
So I don't want to get too off track, but like an example is we were going to have Posty Fest down here in Dallas, and Posty Fest is Post Malone, the guy. Yeah. And they were going to pay us to come wear armor and pay us like $800 for like 12 hours of work to walk around in armor. Unfortunately, it didn't happen because of COVID, which kind of sucks. But there's been stuff around Dallas where like we got paid to go instruct some middle schoolers and like what medieval, because they had like a block, like a 3-month block where they learned about medieval history. So they paid us to come out and teach them about sword fighting and stuff. Yeah. It was rad.
That's neat. It was
super rad. Like we let the kids punch us and stuff with our gear on. It was so fun. We've done stuff like we did a demo at a European restaurant up in Grapevine, and that was super fun. It's a Polish restaurant. And then, so that's another factor of like people who put on shows. And then the third type of event is like, if you're going to like a nationals event or you're going to an international qualifier, that's very sports centric. Where like, you're not going to really see anyone walking around in garb. They're like, I have my athletic wear on and I put my armor on top of it.
I gotcha.
But when they go into the list, you have to be in medieval clothing. That's what you have to do. And like depending on which league you compete in, they have more or less stringent rules on what you can wear. Basically it's the IMCF is one of the big ones. It's not the biggest one. The IMCF says you have to look medieval at a glance of like 30 feet. So your armor has to look pretty medieval. Yeah. But like if it was slightly off, they're not going to penalize you for it. You can wear, I think you don't have to wear medieval footwear. You might have to, I don't really remember. But you don't have to, like your kit doesn't have to match time periods or anything like that.
Okay.
HMB, which is the biggest game or the biggest federation, Historical Medieval Battles. They are the organization that puts on Battle of the Nations. They also organize the most events and competitive environment in the world. They are very strict, pretty strict about what their armor regulations are. Your armor has to match within 50 years of what it is. So if cool. I can't wear like, I can't wear Wimbledon Brigandine with Gothic gauntlets. You just can't. And if your kit doesn't match, you basically have to wear, your tabard has to cover it up. So if I was wearing like a Wimbledon Brigandine with like some more articulated, maybe Gothic arms, and I had a Gothic helmet, and I'd have to wear my tabard over my brig, and it cannot be seen at all. The materials are not really stringent on. You can wear titanium or steel.
Okay.
And you're allowed to wear modern protection underneath your armor and stuff like that.
That's how SCA is like that too. You can wear whatever you want underneath.
Yeah, because it's just safer. I wouldn't wear any helmet you basically wear a line, you have to repad yourself because it's basically couch cushion inside of fabric, and like, oh, you'll just die in that. So yeah, those are kind of like the factors of like, they have Renaissance demos, they have business demos, and then they have like competitive events, and those are just kind of different rules.
That's pretty cool.
Depends on what. Go ahead.
Where does Buhurt fit in all that?
So Buhurt is armored combat. Buhurt is the historical name for the melee simulation thing that we're doing. So it doesn't matter if it's 3v3s, 5v5s, 10 on 10, 20 on 20, 150 on 150. The sport is called Buhurt. As like Buhurt is football basically, but there's different football leagues and whatever. It's really weird. Like, most people colloquially know armor combat as like in the US as like Armor Combat League. Yeah. But it's actually like 2 or 3 different organizations. And the actual correct term is just to call it Buhurt. Okay.
Just because I know we have a local group that call themselves Buhurt, and they travel up to the Ren Fair. They're in Lexington, but they go to the Ohio one, and they come out and do stuff with the local dad groups. They have their practices pretty much next to each other, and there's a lot of cross pollination. It's a pretty cool relationship. But I didn't know if there was a difference between ACL and Buhurt, or if they're pretty much the same.
Yep, they're all the same. So if you were to compete in like armor combat sports as a broad term, you would compete in duels, you could compete in pro fights, you could compete in Buhurt and plate. I think plate is a separate category. So they have like plate duels and they have plate Buhurt and stuff like that, where everyone has to wear plate mail because they're going to stab. But yeah, Buhurt is just the sport name.
I got you.
It's not a very like marketable name. It sounds kind of goofy, but if you're ever looking anything up about armor combat, it would be just look up.
It pops up there.
Yeah.
How did you find that your skills that you had from Amtgard, how did that transfer into the armored combat stuff? Was it similar, or did you have to completely throw it all out and then relearn something new?
So it depends. Buhurt is a lot more like battle gaming than it is sword fighting. And I'm pretty good at battle gaming. So the things that are transferable into Buhurt are really easy. Like, it's just like if a newbie came to Amtgard and they're like, I don't know how to do any of this crap. It's kind of the same way. Like, it doesn't matter if someone's like, you can't generally assume that based on someone's physical condition, like, oh, this guy's gonna be good at Buhurt, because they might just be kind of ignorant about how to play field sports unless they did a field sport. I guess just to say Buhurt is closer to a field sport than it is one-on-one competitions. So my one-on-one stuff isn't as transferable to Buhurt as my battle gaming experiences.
That makes sense.
I've done, besides Amtgard, I mean, I played soccer and stuff like that, so I understand how like field combat generally works. To be humble, but the stuff to transfer to Buhurt, it's pretty real. Like pump faking somebody to like get them to go one direction. You actually flank their guy, then get behind them, and then they're going to run around to this other thing. But like the combat calculations and I forget what it's called. The tactical acumen is completely transferable. So like when we do 5s, we have 8 guys, and usually come out in some type of 5-man formation. Our team runs a 2-1-2, which is 2 guys on the rail, 1 guy in the center, and 2 guys on the other rail, because you fight inside of a list square. So there's stuff about our strategy and like how we're actually going to make this play out and stuff like that. And a lot of that is I take directly from Amtgard and transfer over, which is really fun.
Yeah, that's pretty neat, because I know like when I first got into the SEA, it was difficult for me, because not necessarily from calibration, but from I was so trained not to hit people in the face. And then I didn't mind getting hit in the head, but swinging on someone else's head took me a long time to get over. And then my elbows were hurting from just the shots. And so that was just, it wasn't necessarily a skill that didn't transfer. It was more of a skill that I had to relearn how to throw it, but it was still the basic, like what you're talking about, when you're on a field, Amtgard transfers to Dagger Hero, which transfers to SCA. When you have 100 on 100, those games are pretty much the same. It's just in Amtgard, you got more people yelling and screaming at you.
Yeah, and then like in Amtgard, you get more reps, right? Like you can play a battle game a million times or ditch a million times, and you'd probably get if I ditched for like an hour, I would probably get more reps in line battling than an armored combat probably person gets an entire year. Just because they can't fight that much.
Yeah,
like
I get that.
And maybe on a good day, like depending on your practice, is pretty solid. Like, yeah, man, we did 12 rounds. And you're like, that's not much. That is like literally 12 minutes in Amtgard. So it's like you get a ton of reps from just doing Amtgard. As far as playing Amtgard for a long time, don't hit people in the face. Don't hurt people. So in Buchert, you're like, hit that guy in the face and hurt him. And I'm like, I don't feel really comfortable about doing that. And that is taking me a long time.
Explain how you win in armored combat for those who haven't seen it.
So in Buchert, you have 2 win conditions. Well, 1 win condition, really. You put all the guys on the ground. You put your guy on the ground. Hopefully your teammates do the exact same thing. But really, they need to make 3 points of contact on the ground. And that's it. And the way that happens is you knock them over, you grapple them to the ground, or you hit them so hard they want to quit. And they go, I yield, and they sit down. And that type of interaction is I would classify as being intimate, right? Like I'm going to hurt this guy. He knows I'm going to hurt him. And that's really weird to me because I'm like, in Amtgard, we're fighting with a foam sword. I'm not touching you. I'm not grabbing you. I'm not like doing this behavior that I just have never done. Like for learning grappling, I'm like, I don't like this. This is really weird. I don't want to hurt. I don't want to pull someone too hard and throw them. It's just not something I was comfortable with doing. And in Buchert, like I could think of a good example. It took me a long time to like want to hit someone hard enough to where they went on the ground. Because for the most part, I wouldn't. I just like try to get behind them and shove them over. Yeah. I'm like, okay, that was cool. But now like if my buddy's holding somebody's like, hit him in the knee. And I'm like, I guess so. I don't want to. And only recently, like I've been doing armor combat for 2 years. Only recently I was like, okay, I got my competitive brain has finally overridden my soft mundane personality where I'm like, don't mess that guy up because sports. And I'm like, okay. Like two funny examples. We're at nationals this year in Reno. And it was like, I think our guy, we had 5 up and they had 2 up, and the ref was trying to call it. The ref calls it if it's a 3-on-1. And we had 5 up and 2 up. So it wasn't a 3-on-1. So the ref is trying to call it. I'm like, hold on. I was like, they still got 1 guy up, and I run over and my buddy's holding him. I'm like, hey, I'm here to tell my teammate that I'm there. And I run up, I have a 2-handed axe. I'm like running up, and the guy's kind of like bent over, like my teammate has his arm over him. He's bent over like this. I was like, hey buddy, I need you to go down. And I gave him like a second, maybe a second. And he's like, what? And I immediately just hit him in the knee with my 2-handed axe. And he goes, oh shit, and just fell over. I didn't feel bad about it at all. So
well, like, it's one of those things. If everybody is walking onto the field with the same expectation, it's from an Amtgard perspective, you might cringe at that. But there are people from Nero or from some of the lighter touch games who look at what Amtgard and DAG does and they cringe at what we do. It's about it's if everyone is walking onto the field with the same intent and willing to dish out and willing to receive, it's all good.
And it's actually a really cool thing about the sport in general is like you get this instant camaraderie of like, I go on the field against some guys who are really good. I fully expect them to mess me up and they fully expect me to mess them up. And after the match is over, everyone's high fives and like, good game, woo. Unless someone like actually gets hurt from a legal thing, then for the most part, everyone's just engaging in this experience that's kind of crazy together. Yeah. And there's a lot of camaraderie and there's a lot of, at least from my end, there's a lot of responsibility on my part of like don't be a butthole to somebody because you could actually injure them. Like you want to hurt somebody, but not injure them. And even hitting someone in the knee, I'm like, I don't want to do that. But like hitting him in the correct way in the knee was like no chance. As an example, like you don't in armor combat. So as the rules, you cannot strike people in the neck. Okay. You cannot strike them behind the knees. You cannot strike them in the elbows, like the exposed part of the crook of my arm. And that's pretty much it. Like, you also can't intentionally remove someone's armor.
Fair.
Yeah, because you don't want to like remove someone's armor and they get hurt or something like that. But like accidents happen sometimes. Like there's a thing like just like in SCA, it's called gapping, where I'm trying to hit you between the gaps of your armor.
Yep.
In a lot of competitions, for the most part, you're like, hey, we're going friendly today. Don't intentionally try to gap someone. Don't try to hurt them or whatever. If they're going down, let them go down or whatever. But if you're at a competition like a nationals, one of the nationals this year was like, hey, don't gap. Like, try to avoid it as much as you can. Give that person a warning, like, hey, I'm here. You need to go down. If they ignore you, sure, I guess gap them. But, be polite. Be a good sportsman about it. We're like, all right. And then the other nationals this year were like, yeah, there's no rules in that. Feel free to gap the crap out of them if you want.
Which is my SCA armor right above my knee has a gap before the armor kicks in going up, like up my leg. Oof. Man, when you get hit like in that soft spot, just right there. Yeah. Not fun.
And there's some stuff where like, depending on how good you are, like avoiding damage or blocking or, just mitigating damage, you can go more or less heavy on your type of equipment you wear. There's plenty of people who are like, I wear an all steel kit. It weighs 80 pounds. I'm like, that's cool. I wear titanium. It weighs 47 pounds. Yeah. And like, it's just a different type of thing. Mm-hmm. Like when you're like feeling vulnerable in armor, like almost no armor. There's one guy who makes a harness for this, but almost no one wears ass protection. My deepest fear is being unaware, someone coming behind me and chopping me super hard in the butt cheek with a 2-handed axe. I'll just die. I'm like, oh God, this sucks.
You wouldn't be able to sit for. No, you wouldn't be able to sit. Yeah.
And like that's a huge thing. Like armor coverage, you want your armor to cover you pretty good. And like you just use armor depending on your comfortability with it all.
I remember a couple of years back having conversations with you about armor and Amtgard and how so unfunctional most Amtgard armor was. When you're talking about, so coming from a game where armor plays a very large part in your physical safety compared to Amtgard, which it kind of does, but not really, right? You're not going to get hurt with when you say that the Amtgard armor oftentimes isn't functional. Do you remember, I guess, first off, do you remember that conversation? And then two, can you give me some examples of the difference between the games and the armor?
Okay. So since starting armor combat, I actually had to learn about like how a gambeson works on your body, how armor generally functions on your body. Like your body moves around and does different stuff. It changes lengths depending on like the position of your arms, your legs, or your torso. So it needs to be able to move and collapse on itself and do these other things. As an example, like if I was wearing non-articulating upper thigh armor, when I raise my leg, the leg armor shifts up because I'm shortening the length of my leg. And it kind of like bites into your hip, right? Or if, I'm wearing
chest armor that doesn't bend.
Chest armor that doesn't do this. You're like, that's stupid. That doesn't even work. Same thing for pauldrons that like I can do this. I can reach behind my head in my armor. That's what you want to be able to do. You want to be able to move in it. And like Amtgard armor dagger armor does it too. But I don't want to pick on Amtgard too much. Amtgard armor is not armor. It's just not. Like you could say like, oh, this looks like Greaves or whatever. And you're like, no, it doesn't. That's just a leather tube. You just think that because you watch shitty 80s like Conan.
Conan, yeah.
Like, and I get it. Like, if I thought like before I started in armor combat, I'm like, that's not really armor. But now I've played armor combat, I'm like, that's definitely not armor.
That's not helping you at all.
And it's frustrating because when I come to Amtgard, I want to think that people are actually wearing armor, but because I know it's not actually armor, I'm like, it just kind of throws away the experience for me. And I wouldn't mind if it was not protective. If it was like Warbla or a cosplay armor, as long as it functioned as armor in the way that's intended to work as armor, I wouldn't care. But like the way people make greaves, like I've seen this style of greave where it's not really articulated. It sits on the top of your foot, and then the top, it has a knee cop, but the knee is sewn together like this. So it creates this like, I don't know how to describe that. It's like one of those. Yeah. You know what I mean? Where it's sewn at the top of the knee, and that's the greave. And you're like, can you fully extend your knee in that? I don't think you can. That's probably super uncomfortable to wear. Or like people who make leather torso armors.
Don't
that
have
are
any
not
flexibility at
anatomical.
all.
They can't do any of that. And you're like, this looks terrible. And another thing is like bracers. People wear bracers and they put them. So like your forearm is an oval, right? Like it's supposed to, the gap is supposed to be on top of your forearm, not on the inside of your forearm. And if it's a barrel, it just turns on your arm a lot.
Just rolls.
So it just makes people look super gooberish when they're fighting. And I wish I could explain to people, I'm like, if you had proper fitting armor, you would realize how garbage this is. And I just can't explain it well enough.
Well, and
this looks terrible.
Well, one of my favorite videos of you is doing your assassin roll at Bridge Wars in your full kit. You know what video I'm talking about?
The one where I'm wearing a black Amazon.
Was it? I thought you had chain on over there. Okay.
Well, I've done both. I have one where I'm wearing my red armor, and I've done like a forward roll in that, and that was pretty okay. But that armor could actually be better. Okay. Sorry, I didn't want to cut.
No, I would say you are one who, I'll say you are unique for Sword Knights from the ones that I have met, because you actively love playing battle games, and most of the Sword Knights that I have met don't. They are tournament fighters, and then they might be on the field every now and then. Randy likes to fight too, but you and him are really about it that I see battle gaming frequently. When you put on armor, no matter what class you're playing, it is something I have to worry about. Not on the other side. Yeah. Not only because you're obviously a great stick, but when you're playing assassin, when you're playing warrior, when it doesn't matter what you're putting on, you move in armor better than most people. Is that because of the kit specific? Is that something you were doing? Why are you so good at armor fighting when what made you Warlord is unarmored? How do you transfer those skills, if that makes sense?
So I didn't start wearing armor until really regularly until like right before I became a Warlord. Mostly because I didn't have the money for it. I'm like, I don't have money to buy armor. But like my friends bought me armor. My friends made me and bought me armor for my knighting. And I was like, I gotta start wearing armor. This is too cool. And then I started wearing armor. At first my armor was not very efficient. It's something I had to learn to fight in, just because you get more laggy and you're kind of like, your movements are more drawn out, and you start to optimize your kit. As far as like LARP armor and fighting in LARP armor, it's extraordinarily easy. You just have to know how to make a light kit. A lot of people, an example, Vaughn, he's in my fighting company. He's like, I wear 14 gauge chainmail legs. And I'm like, that is stupid. That's, I don't know why you would do that. Like, it's not good armor for Amtgard. It's good armor for like something else that's not Amtgard. Like if you want to do a reenactment and do whatever, that's fine. But like as far as optimizing my kit, that's a huge part of it. I think
hold on. He said this earlier. I'm gonna pull it up because it's funny to me. Raven dropping truth bombs. Take it out of context completely there. But
we'll use it in this particular context.
Sorry. It is 16 gauge jerk, not it's 14.
I think 16 is. No, 18 gauge is the minimum for chainmail.
Yeah, 16 still. Yeah, 16
I wish the gauge was at 20. I wish that was the minimum, just so people wouldn't have to wear really cumbersome armor for a foam sport. It's just not necessary. But as far as like my personal kit and like doing that stuff, when we were doing Phoenix League competitively, I changed a lot of my armor around to where it was like and depending on the rules, you can min-max your armor using certain bonuses or negatives to do that. Like I wore leg armor that was 4-point butted plate, because normally like the armor is not overlapped when you lay it flat, but when you wrap it around your leg, it then becomes overlapped. Those were like aluminum. I think it was aluminum butted plate, but then my knee cop, which was like 50% of my armor, was steel. So it's and you start averaging the butted plate and the steel, and you're like, oh, it's 5 points. And then my chest piece is extraordinarily expensive for LARPing. It was like $500 or something like that, because it's aluminum anodized plates with lamellar with superior overlap and heavy gauge. And then I had, in the rule book, it says you can wear a chainmail as a gambeson. Most people buy riveted aluminum chainmail. I bought a shark mail shirt, and then
I love mail.
put steel plates over it, which increases its higher ratio. It's not a 1 point anymore; it's 3. And I wore plate in specific locations to increase the average. And then I switched from using combat boots because those just kind of suck to just wearing indoor soccer cleats. And then as far as like fighting in it, I actually kind of had to change the way I fight in general to learn how to fight in armor better. A lot of things, I was actually going to make a video about this, about fighting in armor. A lot of people, when they fight in armor, they do all these types of shots that they do when they do one-on-one fighting. So like a lot of people like do like these really deep like reverse wraps and like these really dexterous movements of like, that's not a natural position to get into, but you can do it like once, right? But unfortunately, we're fighting in armor. I need to hit you more than once. I need to hit you like upwards of 7 times. So I started adopting a different fighting style for that. A lot of that came from like reading Book of the 5 Rings and studying boxing and stuff like that, where like especially in boxing, the goal is literally to hit the person as much as possible. So like I changed my fighting style to be like a really in boxing be called outfighting, where you're fighting at range and like picking at the closest thing to you, and to being really up close with people. Like the difference of like, you might do tournament fighting. We're like, oh, we're going to try all this range control and like do all this misdirection and feints and stuff. And when I wear armor, if I'm playing warrior, I'm like, I have 6 points of armor and whatever you're playing, I don't care. I'm just going to run up to you because you can't kill me fast enough. I'm going to smash your sword out of the way and hit you with both my swords really quickly and then turn and go kill someone else. So a lot of it is just literally that, just smashing their sword out of the way and then hitting them a bunch. As far as like doing all like the fancy stuff in armor, my kit's extraordinarily light. I think my chest piece is 5 pounds. I think it might be 4.5 pounds. And then the total of my kit can fit in a small luggage bag. And my Boo Hurt kit fits in a large luggage bag and a small luggage bag. So my armor is pretty light, and that just allows me to fight in a really efficient way. That's not super bad. I also have a specific conditioning program for that stuff to like make me better at like running around the field a lot.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is because of the other games that you play, your physical conditioning probably lets you run in Amtgard armor all day long.
Pretty much.
And Madness is kind of the same way. He does a lot of the heavy man, the strong man stuff, and he's getting his extra Amtgard stuff is now when he fights in armor, he can just run way longer than what most people can in our game because they don't have the physical conditioning. And so take it from not Warlord Godric here. If you want to get good at armor fighting, you need to get good in good physical condition outside of Amtgard. And then that will translate more than what most other things will.
Well, to be honest, you can get in good physical health from just playing Amtgard. It's just you have to play Amtgard differently. Like one little thing I like doing that people probably don't frown upon this, I'm just going to let you on a hilarious secret. When I was champion of my park in 2014, I was a champion of Blackfire Pass. I was like, man, my friends are getting really big. I need to help my friends out. So what I did was I organized all the games in such a way that made them run back and forth towards the objectives every single week, every single Sunday. I'm like, and then I would design like the park day to be like, we're going to play battle games for 4 hours. It'd be like, we play a battle game for 30 minutes. You get a 10-minute break. We do ditching. And then we go ditching and do another battle game. And my goal is like, I'm always going to like, my goal was when I was champion, I'm like, we're going to play 3 battle games a day. I'm going to make the battle games in such a way that is like, your death count's short. I'll be like, your death count's 15 seconds. Like, oh, that's not bad at all. Except it's like 200 feet between one base and the 2 bases. So like if the one team gets a flag and takes it all the way back to the base, now you're like, I spawned in 15 seconds. I'll say it's 15 seconds from death or like 30 seconds from death. Well, if they walk back to their base, they're more penalized because they're just walking, but they're rewarded if they run back to base. So if they run back to base, they get in the game quicker. So instead of like making them wait at base, specifically, I think I made them count from death. So instead of making them count at their base, I'd be like, it's 30 seconds from death. So if you're like, haul ass back to your base and then run all the way back across the field, you're rewarded for taking the extra effort. And then I designed the games in such a way where like, I'm going to put terrain around the field to make them run around the terrain and do different stuff. And
I love it. I love it.
Stuff like that. And like, as far as like trying to get in shape. A lot of people play Amtgard. They're like, this is the only exercise I get all week. If that's the only exercise you get all week, that's great. Like, at least you're doing something.
Yep.
And I think like, if you really wanted to like I want to improve my conditioning by playing Amtgard, that's certainly something you can do. That's something that like, even they do in the fitness industry. They basically trick you into playing games to make you lose, to get you in shape. Yeah. CrossFit does that. Yeah. CrossFit is basically gym class for adults. Like, I'll do a bunch of these activities and people do the activities and they feel great about it. Same thing for Amtgard. If I was like, I went out to a park day at midnight sun down here in Garland. I was like, I haven't played Amtgard in a while. I'm going to really push my cardio because it's kind of like my off day. I'm not going to go lift or do armor combat or anything like that, but I probably should do some cardio. So we played Ring the Bell. And we did the Ring the Bell with ditch rules. So if I ding the bell, I stay. If whoever doesn't know what Ring the Bell is, each team has a bell. You run across the field, ding the bell. My favorite version of this is if you ding the bell, you stay in that side.
Yeah.
And every single person on your team has to ding the bell. So every round, I just run across the field, try to kill someone and ring the bell. If I died, and we did instant respawn. So if I died, I was incentivized to run all the way back to my base and spawn again. And that's just a way I made it more fun for me. And I'm like, I want to work on my conditioning. I'm just going to run all day. And that's just fun, I guess.
That's something we've been doing more and more at our park as well. Cause we're a smaller park. We're running, 4-on-4, 5-on-5 games. And we use ditch rules frequently. Just after every, we play 3 points or first to 3 points, and then losing team selects a player from the winning team, play again, and rotate the teams back and forth like that. And that has been a super fun way to get small team games to be fair, but gets people keep running and keep going. And we've been having a lot of fun with that one.
I think that is actually the secret sauce in having a really healthy park, because like one of the issues, I don't know if it's a common topic nowadays. It used to be like all the fighters want to ditch and they don't want to come play battle games. And all the battle gamers are like, I don't want to go ditch. That's just fighting. I want to do battle games. And you're like, well, we can do both. We can ditch with objectives. Like, it's not ditching, but you use ditch weapon rules and stuff, except you make it an objective-based game. So now all the fighters are still doing the same fighting. You've created a particular scenario around this thing. Now the battle gamers get to scratch their battle gamer brain, like, all right, how do I win in this scenario, whatever. So they're becoming better team fighters. Well, they're becoming better battle gamers. And every person in your park is participating in the shared experience of like learning how to get better at Amtgard and learning how to get better at scenarios and stuff like that. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
So that's basically why Dagahir is so popular, Belgarth and Dagahir, is because maybe they ditch, but like every battle game they play, everyone plays together. And I think that's a really, really healthy thing for Amtgard, and like something I really liked a lot. I was at a point where like we're at BFP and everyone really wanted a battle game, and maybe people didn't want to ditch, whatever. Well, okay, let's do a bunch of objective-based games that are really quick, that have no setup for them. You just do them. And then we play some actual class games, stuff like that. And just doing that, like what you're talking about, got our park from like being 6 active members to having the most active members in Amtgard in like a year and a half, maybe a year and a half. It's something crazy. And that's just a really fun way of creating engaged experiences for players.
One of my favorite games that I've ever played was at a DAG event, and it was essentially where night ditching, they had the lights out, but so essentially they had 2 buckets, and they just split the teams up 50-50 at the beginning. And whenever you died, you switched teams and went to the other team's bucket and respawned. And it was just go until and people would leave, get water, that Reeves would just, hey, go to this side. And it evens out very similar to ditch, and you get to fight different people very similar to ditch, but there's no downtime. Like there's no, all right, who's left, who's what, like when you die, you walk over to the other team's bucket, spawn in, and now you're on the other team and you just keep fighting. Like it was super fun. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. So viewers, we've got between 7 and 10. It keeps bumping up here. Go ahead. If you have any questions for Sir Raven, throw them in the chat, and here in a few minutes, I'll get to those. So go any question about any of the things we've talked about, or any questions specifically for Raven that I haven't asked. But while those are coming in, I want to ask you a little bit about your path to Warlord.
Okay.
What was that like? How long did it take? What was the regiment? Give me the story of how did Sir Raven become Warlord Sir Raven?
Okay, so I played Amtgard from when I was like 13 to like 16, and then our park collapsed. Well, our principality collapsed, and I was in high school, so I stopped playing Amtgard for a while. And then I was like 19 or 20. I was like, and then some of my friends were like, "Hey, we're playing Amtgard again." I'm like, "Okay, cool, I'll try that out." I'll get back into it. And then there's the same couple of old friends, and we went to keep the first keep on the Borderlands. I'm like, yeah, this is still rad. And basically from my first keep, I was like, I had competed in a keep. I think I got like 8th place or something like that. And I had taken a long time off, and I'd beaten a bunch of guys who were like pretty much at the top of the kingdom at the time. And like, I was like, oh, I could do this. I could definitely do this. And so basically keep 1 and then add 5 years. I got my Warlord in 5 years. Looking at how to be Warlord and how to get there. I talk a lot about travel. I'm like, hey, every Warlord should travel. And a lot of people look at that in a negative connotation. Like, I shouldn't have to travel 4 hours to go to a tournament or whatever. That's actually not what I mean. What I actually mean is you traveling. I just mean travel to different parks. Like if you're in the Rising Winds, you have 30 parks to go to. Like just go to another parks tournament, or like go to another park and fight with those guys. So I didn't know how to formalize this like when I was younger, and why traveling is really important. And so that's something my mentors told me to do as well. It's like, if you want to be Warlord, you got to travel a lot. That's what Potato told me. That's what Sir Tukin told me. And what that actually does is it exposes you to different types of martial fighting styles, even if you don't realize it at the time. And what that does is it keeps your learning honest. Because you can learn something in a microcosm or like a meta sense. Like your park has this meta of fighting, and you're going to develop solutions and strategies based around what that meta is. Now, if you don't travel to other parks, your data isn't not necessarily confirmed. Like what you have learned is not necessarily the truth of what actual fighting is. So when you travel to another park, you try out all these different strategies and stuff like that to see if they actually work against those players. Depending if they're more or less successful, you start to find commonly what I consider the truth, and what martial, like the truth of like rules of combat and like what concepts actually work. A lot of people, especially nowadays, the meta has become so huge. Like it's not just like a localized meta. You'll have localized meta still, but like in a broad sense, a lot of people play the game really similarly as far as like tournament fighting. And the meta isn't like super that in depth. Well, it's in depth, but it's like mostly the same stuff. You don't see a lot of people fighting really differently. You see warlords do it because they've beat the meta, right? They found out what the truth was. They're like, well, I already figured out the meta. Now I'm going to figure out at an individual level how to express myself and beat that meta. And they've kind of ascended past, meta ideas, and now they're at fully conceptualized, like they know how to fight now.
You got to know the rules before you can break them, type of thing.
Yeah. And there's I think I was fighting really strictly for a while. When I first learned how to block strike, I fought very, very strictly on like what types of rules I was going to play by to find out what the correct things about fighting were, where I'm like, okay, this is true, this is not true. And like, so when I say people need to travel, that's what I mean. Go to another park, go to another state. If you're close by, do that type of stuff. That includes, so that goes into our second point of networking. A lot of people talk about like, there's some crazy people have conspiracy theories about what warlords are and what sword knights are. And they're like, well, there's this evil cabal of warlords who only help other warlords become good at fighting. And you're like, that's not really how that works. That's actually just networking. So my second point is networking. You need to get with other like-minded people in your region, at your park or whatever, and to start learning how to fight. Like network with people you don't know. If you see someone on YouTube and you're like, that guy's pretty good at fighting, I'm gonna contact the guy on Facebook and talk to him and be like, hey, I saw this thing. Can you give me pointers about that? 9 times out of 10, anyone who's good at fighting loves talking about fighting. Doesn't matter who you are.
Anything. You can apply that to any aspect in our game. Anybody who's good at garbing loves talking about garbing. Anybody who's good at armoring loves talking about that's going to go anywhere.
A lot of people will talk about how like Sword Knight and Warlord's really toxic. I'm sorry. I've been playing the game for 20 years. The culture of Warlord and Sword Knight is better than it's ever been as terms of being like being sociable, being responsible for your role as a Warlord or a Sword Knight. A lot of people who teach at SKBC, there's like 25 instructors. They're all very, very similarly minded. And like, you need to be a good teacher. You need to be a good person. You need to put good content out and know what you're talking about. And that permeates throughout basically what we teach other Warlords, like be a good person. And you can pretty much like, if I don't know you on Facebook and you just message me one day, there's a good chance I'm probably going to talk to you. Cause you're like, hey, can you show me how to do some lefty stuff? I'd be like, oh, sure. Whatever. Or like, it could be anything. So don't be afraid to network people in your region. Don't be afraid to network with people that you find their fighting interesting.
I think that's a big one too. Like, and I tell a lot of our new fighters, they're on YouTube, they're watching videos, they're sending me like, hey, would you see this? Find someone whose fighting style you find interesting and someone whose body build is similar to your own. Because you know, if you're 6'2" and you're watching a 5'8" fighter, you're going to learn some stuff, but you're going to learn a lot quicker by watching videos from someone who is of a similar build to you, especially when you're newer. When you get up into higher levels, it doesn't matter as much, but especially when you're newer.
Yeah. And it just depends on how conceptual their fighting is. Like some big points I've taken from some fighters I can think of from like, I took a lot of points from those guys. They're either guys my size or like way taller than me, which is funny. Like I took a lot of training points from Potato, from Toucan, and from Clawlibus. If you don't know who Clawlibus is, he's a really small fighter who's like 130 pounds, but he's like one of the hardest hitting, fastest moving fighters to ever play the game. And the other two people I would really say I took a lot from those guys would be like, I took a lot from Peter the Quick, who's much taller than I am. I've taken a lot from Sir Leaf when he was alive. The videos he put on YouTube were foundational in how I approach like how to actually fight people. He has this cool video about like, here's how you throw a money shot, and he breaks down all the components of how to throw a money shot. And people are like, oh, those are just the components. They don't think about why those components exist. Like he talks about, first, I'm going to actually take this large step to the outside. So he's talking about positioning. Then he's like, and then I'm going to throw this feint to draw their shield up. More positioning of the opponent, controlling them. Then he's talking about brushing his sword across their eyes. Okay, misdirection. He's like, and then I'm going to throw this shot that I'm really good at throwing. And you're like, those are just components of a setup. You have positioning, a control, a damage mitigation, basically, or like another form of control, the attack. And then he says, I can throw this attack, or if they throw at me, I'm already in a position to block and I can throw this other thing. And he has an optional route and an escape route. So it's like, those are the things that actually make up an attack plan. And people often miss that. Like, well, if those are my components of a setup, I can take those apart and apply them to anything. So when you start thinking about how to make up your own attacks, that's how you start formalizing those ideas.
I've got an idea not computer minded at all for me. I would love a tool where you could type in, your height, your weight, your wingspan, and it then filters that through all of the video resources that we have from all of these different warlords and top tier fighters and says, okay, this person is roughly your height, roughly your wingspan, learn from them. Or if you're a lefty, righty, because I know like that matters a lot. Are you looking for flow tips or pole tips or what, you know what I mean? And then it filters it out through it. I think that would be super.
That would
helpful.
Be pretty cool. Yeah. I'm trying to think of like that project would be kind of crazy.
Like for someone who knows what they're doing, I feel like it wouldn't be terribly difficult.
Like if you had to like program it or whatever.
The hard part I think would just be adding new content to the database enough and then putting in the controls for it. But the people, I mean, we've got the org, we should be able to do that type of thing, Yeah.
So the third thing, so we have traveling to confirm your theories. networking, which is to get new ideas in. Third, you need to actually create a community around you and create, especially at your local park and like maybe some neighboring parks that aren't too far away, creating a good community of people who want to like learn stuff and just go through this information together. And that's what really gets you the most gains. So a thing that someone said it in a SCA video one time, I forget, or sorry, SKBC video. You often see warlords and sword knights come up as groups together. And it's because they created a community together. They trained together. They learned similar things and they benefited and became warlords. For the longest time, people who are really like, they either are a warlord now or could have been a warlord. And it was because we created a community around this. Potato, I was Potato Squire. Tisco is a warlord, was Potato Squire. Bino is now a warlord and was Potato Squire. Ferrix was my squire at one time. Travis Tresser was Potato Squire at one point. Gemini, Greg Lavender is my good friend. We've trained together for like 15 years. Blade is my brother. I say he's my brother. Could have been a warlord or is going to be a warlord at some point. All these guys train together at some point and they learn the same stuff and they get through all the data and stuff they need to get through. And so then going into my fourth point is you got to learn the shit. Like you can't just be like, man, I spent 2 days a week or 1 day a week trying this stuff. I'm not any better at fighting. I'm like, so if you train 2 days a week, you'd be getting through 100% more data than you would at 1 day a week. And I know you and I have talked about this before of like getting, when I say going through the data and formalizing how you want to train, a lot of people just get together and spar, which is kind of fun. Like that's fine. I don't think it is an optimal way of learning something. I think doing drills and learning these drills, learning all the stuff those drills have to offer, and then applying those in a sparring environment, phenomenal. I think like 50% of your practice should probably be drilling and the other 50% should probably be sparring.
Which is not how most Amtgarders train. If you were just
go and fight a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, well, and like, I don't want to sound like not to sound braggadocious or whatever. I'm like, I came back at Amtgard at a point where I was beating some of the best fighters in the game, some of the best fighters in our kingdom in like a year. And then I was doing it in like I think in 3 years I was winning kingdom tournaments already. And then at 5 years I was already a warlord and I beat many of my contemporaries to warlord and exceeded what they would accept as the minimum thing. I'm thinking like at the same time, guys I was competitive with at the time, I had double or triple their qualifications in getting their warlord. That's just because that's my own personal standard. That had nothing to do with my opinion on it. But that's just getting through as many reps as possible. And that's how I'd approach if I want to be better at anything. And sure, there's some stuff where like there are some qualities of my life that were very destructive towards that. But I was also 22, 23. So that was going to happen no matter what.
Yeah.
But
if that's
it's like
the worst thing I did in my early 20s was become a warlord, you're doing all right.
Yeah. But like practicing, it's like most people are like, we have a sparring day on Wednesday and then we do park. How much do you fight at park? We do 30 minutes of fighting. You're like, oh, okay. And like, I think I had 2 sparring days and 1 park day. And then when I was really bored, I would do like 30 minutes to an hour on 2 other days to do drills by myself. Because I didn't have anyone to fight with. And that was just pelling and doing footwork. So I basically had 5 training days a week.
Which is pretty common from what I've heard from other warlords is that 5 to 6 days a week number.
Yeah, I think 3 is the absolute minimum. And it's like, that's the amount of time you put into something is proportional to how long it will probably take you to do it. Everyone's different and they achieve it in shorter or longer periods of time, depending on your personal qualities and stuff like that. But it is proportional. If you spend like 1 to 3 days a week doing something, it's going to take you 10 years to do it. If I do it 5 days a week, okay, I just got like 75% of more time. I'm going to achieve that in a much shorter period of time. If I'm doing it 6 or 7 days a week, I'm going to get good pretty fast. An example of that would actually be Warlord Tisco. Tisco did Dagger here for a while. He was bad. He was really bad when he started Amtgard. And then he started Amtgard and he could have warlorded in 3 years, but he chose to he didn't want to take it yet. He had some other things he wanted to achieve before he accepted Warlord, but he was dominating his kingdom tournaments in like 3 years, I think. That's because that kid was grinding super hard. He was like 6 or 7 days a week. He had some homies with him that he fought with. All those guys are really good at fighting now. 2 of them are warlords. The other 2 could have been warlords or should have been warlords already. And that was just because they put in the dedication and time, which that's not normal for a LARP. That's not normal for people. Like that's an impossible thing you should request of somebody. And you're like, that would be an impossible thing if I was thinking about achieving something in a LARP. But for those people, it's not a LARP. It is studying martial arts. Like if you said that to someone who studies martial arts, they'd be like, oh yeah, I do martial arts 6 days a week. You won't even think anything about it. Like, I think Sir Brett does at his peak was doing judo 2 times a day, 4 times a week, maybe 5 times a week. And just learning martial arts, you're like, that's just what you want to pursue. So people kind of taken Warlord out of the context of a LARP and kind of made it something else, which it's however you feel about it. That's what it is. So if people want to get good at Warlord, what I say. First one, you have to travel, network, create a community, and then learn the stuff and put in the time to actually do it.
I'm gonna just briefly before we get into the questions. You're talking about people who say that's an unreasonable expectation for a masterhood in a LARP. I would go at least for the crafting stuff. When I was pushing for my masterhood, I was crafting 5 nights a week.
Yeah, how many hours was it?
2 or 3 hours a night. I mean,
that's a lot.
Let's see if you can see it. Oh, come on, camera. I've been doing paracord today and I've torn the finger off my skin just because I haven't done a paracord belt in a while, but like other masterhoods in the game other than Warlord take that much time also. You just don't see it as much. And they're going to be more, the serpent ones and the sword ones are probably going to be more time invested overall. They're tangible, but Flame, while they might not be doing as much Monday through Friday or like just off weeks, their events are consumed with the LARP. While you are enjoying feast, they're cooking, or while you're enjoying games, they're cooking feast. While you're enjoying your $40 that you spent for the weekend, they are donating 80 hours of their time. Yeah. All of the masterhoods take that much effort. It's just Warlord's the one that is most visible.
I will say, I think the separating factor is that people do not value their time the same way consistently. If someone was going to an event and someone says, this is a really common topic, I don't want to go tough bushes in it. If someone says, event shouldn't be more than $20, like I'm just going camping for the weekend. I'm like, I don't need to create that big of an experience. And for me, I'm like, yes, I'm going away for the weekend. I want that to be an enjoyable experience. Please charge me more money so you can create a better experience for me.
Same.
Like, I don't want to waste my time while I'm here. If I went to a camping event for even if it's a day and I'm like, this kind of sucks, I feel like I honestly wasted the day. I'm kind of mad about it. That's why I mostly day trip when I go to events down here. I mean, obviously I'm not going to do that when I go up to the RW because we're awesome. We have good events. But I would be pissed if I traveled 8 hours and was camping for 3 days and the event kind of sucked because like, oh, we didn't have enough money to make battle game props. So your guys are going to fight in a swampy field today. And you're going to play Kill Your Killer. Like that would suck. But as far as like spending your time, dude, I don't even want to imagine how much time a king in the RW spends each day addressing kingdom issues. They would blow me out of the water as far as like the amount of time they put into something.
Agreed.
Like, and it's not the same. Like, well, we shouldn't accept that same quality. I would actually say our standards for Flame Night are really, 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 really high. Like really high. And
I spent more time probably in any given week of my reign as Kingdom Regent, as much time as I did when I was pushing for my masterhood for Dragon. Like just the amount of time in conversations and planning and that's Regent. I had one of the easier jobs, right? That's not even That's not even king or any of the BOD spots. You're not banning people. You're not, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I was putting together content during COVID, and it was organizing other people to set up and do the things that they love. And that took some time, but like all of the masterhoods take time. That's part of it.
And then like the things that's not seen in the back end is like research time. Mm-hmm. I say I was spending 5 days a week doing Warlord. I was spending every single day at least 40 minutes a day, probably doing research on fighting. And I didn't even consider that as a part of the stuff I was actually doing. I'm like, oh yeah, if I considered that, I'd be a part-time job.
You go and you look through my YouTube history as I'm pushing for new ideas for ANS stuff. I'm watching, an hour while I'm doing my belts. I'm looking through YouTube, watching other videos in the background on, this wire weaving thing. How can I bring that into my belt stuff? Oh, here's another project over here that might tangentially, be connected to what I'm trying to do here. Mm-hmm. And so when you're laying in bed, getting ready to go to sleep, you're thinking about what you're doing. Like, that's part of it. Yeah.
Like going from like Warlord to Sword Knight, like I was already doing the stuff to be a knight anyway while I was a Warlord because my knight told me to do that stuff. A big part of that was community organization and just growing your community and the specific vector that I worked in. Like every single knight, basically, if they don't, they should be, or they should be a knight. If they're not growing their community, then they shouldn't be a knight.
Agreed.
But growing it in the vector of like, I'm putting together classes to teach people, or I'm on Facebook until 2 a.m. talking to people about fighting. Or if one of the countless people that comes to me and talks to me about their tendonitis, like, I got tendonitis. What do I do? I'm like, well, luckily I did a bunch of research on tendonitis. I'm going to tell you to go to the doctor, but here's what I learned about tendonitis and sword fighting. So I tell them about that. Or like just reaching out and helping anyone who asks you. And I should be probably a little bit more selfish about my time. But most knights I find are very unselfish about their time, which kind of annoys me when people are like, X knight or this knight doesn't do blank. I'm like, there's a good chance that they probably do.
You just don't know about it.
Yeah. Like it's like I've seen it before where like nothing against flame knights, but some flame knights are like, these sword knights don't even do anything. I'm like, when's the last time you had to go to Delaware to teach a weekend long class? Okay, that's what I thought.
Well, and one of the things for me, a lot of people will disagree with me on this. I think one of the roles of knights in our game is to be awe-inspiring. They are the ones who, when a new player shows up, they're like, I aspire to be that one day. And out of all of them, Sword Knight is the one that is most clearly awe-inspiring for your average new player.
Because they're on the field doing stuff.
Because they're exactly and it's the most like, if I am a first week player and I'm introduced to a Flame Knight, I'm not going to see what they're doing necessarily until I hit an event or whatever. I walk out on that first day and that Sword Knight smokes me and then shows me why he smoked me and maybe gives me a sword or whatever it is. Like, I'm going to see that. And your Sword Knights are the first thing that most new players see the first knight that they encounter, and they should be awe-inspiring.
I think so. I think I was 13. The first knight I actually ever met was Thorvald, and he came out. This was like Thorvald was like probably like 28 or 30. He came out in his super badass barbarian garb, and at the time I didn't know he's bad at fighting, but he had this sweet ass barbarian garb. And we were having a bear pit tournament at our park, and I was trying to get my first order of the warrior, and I was like, the third fight I had to fight Thorvald, and I'm like, crap, this dude's gonna beat the shit out of me. And he's a knight. I was like, he plays anti-paladin too. This dude's a bad mamma jamma. And I think I luckily killed him or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I got my first order of the warrior or something like that. Or he I don't remember. He might have actually killed me. I didn't think about it. And that was the coolest thing I ever seen. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's actually a knight. Like, it was super cool. And then he was just a crown knight at the time, I think. Yeah. I don't think he was a serpent knight. No, he was a serpent. Right?
Yeah, he had his serpent first.
But that was just a random dude that was like, that's so cool that guy plays Amtgard. And then like, as far as like being awe-inspiring, like the first sword knight I met, I can still visualize exactly where I was. I was at Clan, and I was watching Sir Warblade have a mace and a flat blade sword, and just running up the ditch line and like just parrying dude's swords, beating the crap out of him. And I was like watching the dude, and I was like, I'm gonna be a sword knight one day.
Yeah,
that's amazing. And then since then I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do.
I'm doing it. Yeah. That is part of the role. Is you are in whatever, like what you said, whatever vector you're in, to be awe-inspiring to new players, to help them, not help them, but to I don't even, inspire is probably the right word, to pursue the vector of the game that you love.
I think at the core of Amtgard, what it actually does for people is helps them become, hopefully, better people. Everyone who generally joins this game is a part of alt culture in some facet. They're kind of weird in some way. Doesn't matter what it is. They not necessarily feel a part of mainstream society, so they join Amtgard in some way. And through that and then joining Amtgard is heavily encouraged, and we award people for doing something constructive for their life. And doesn't matter what it is, they're somehow going to fundamentally change themselves, hopefully in a good way, to being a better person. Like maybe you weren't in shape, you started playing Amtgard. You learned about fighting. You want to lose some weight, be good at fighting. It's happened to tons of people. Maybe you didn't do leadership because you kind of like were in your shell and you don't want to do leadership, right? Maybe you're a nerd in high school. Well, you got part of Amtgard and you started doing leadership, and now you became a leader. You got management skills, and that's going to change your life in real life. So I think as an expression of the game, knights need to be the person who tells you to become a better person, whether you like it or not. You're like, I don't want to be a better person. I'm like, sorry, you should do that. And like, we should ultimately be here to help people and do stuff, and be a representation of their community to be a power of change and stuff like that.
100%. I love it. So I'm going to move now to some of our questions. Let's do 3 minutes or less on each of these and see if we can get through them here. All right. So first one, favorite weapon combo to play with in Amtgard and why?
Okay. Favorite weapon combo, probably 2 swords. One, it's difficult to do. You have to build up a lot of attributes. And by attributes, I mean like skills and stuff. And basketball or football and sports, these are like how you move around, how you, how you play this, how you play the game in a physical way. You have to learn a lot of attributes to use 2 swords. And it's very, you have to learn these attributes that are kind of hard to learn. Like you have to learn to fight with the other hand. You have to, do all these types of things. Florentine is very expressive for me. Because I learned from boxing and Jeet Kune Do and other types of martial arts, and being able to attack with my other hand allows me to create very fun, creative setups for attacks, and allows me to express myself in a very playful way that's fun. And it looks super rad.
It does.
Every time you see someone who's good at Florentine, you're like, that dude's got some sweet style or something. As much as someone can like throw a spin shot with a sword and shield, you can throw a spin shot, but I'm like, yeah, but have you killed 2 people at the same time? So Florentine is super fun. It's also good for battle gaming because you have less equipment on you. I have 2 swords. You can get much closer to people and you can maneuver around them without this cumbersome circle on the front of your body or whatever. A punch shield is also pretty good. But yeah, 2 swords is really fun. And maybe a runner up would be polearm. I really like polearm.
The 2-stick is the most, like we were just talking about, the most awe-inspiring. Like when I see someone who is just fantastic, Blade. When Blade picks up 2-stick, man, I'm like, man, I want to fight 2-stick. And then I pick up 2-stick and get smoked. And it's like, come on now, it can't be that hard, Like,
would it be bad if I told you he's not very good at fighting Floyd?
Dude,
he's not very good at it.
You don't really?
No, he's not.
So when I see,
he doesn't use his left hand, but yeah.
Well, when I see people fight 2-stick in tournaments in the open category, flow versus flow is a whole nother beast. But like when I see someone walk up with flow in the open category and just smoke people, it impresses the heck out of me. And he was one of the guys who I saw do that.
Yeah. Doing 2 sword against anything else it's risky, but it's really, really fun and rewarding.
It's beautiful. Like it is just, it's such a cool, like, I don't know. There's no other thing that we have. And I'm a sucker for off meta, and 2-stick is always going to be off meta, I feel. So.
Yeah. There's generally a thing of like, if someone has a polearm and open weapon and you have 2 sword and you're like, that polearm guy's like, I'm probably gonna kill this Florentiner, and the Florentiner's like, if I kill you, you're gonna look so stupid right now. Which is sometimes it happens. I mean, I don't really particularly care about fighting someone with a polearm. Like, I do not care. Like, it's whatever. Unless they're really good with a polearm, which has happened. But for the most part, I'll fight two sword against anybody. If it wasn't two sword, it would actually be right-handed Madu or right-handed down spear. Okay. Because the Madu is meant to be used in the left hand because the spikes are on the non-shield side of the body. And sometimes I like fighting with my right hand and feel like a normal person. I'm actually left-handed. So when I use a Madu, I feel kind of cool when I'm like, you can like throw this cross shot and their hand comes up high, then you pin their sword up and then stab them in the ribs with the Madu. Or doing stuff like that is just super fun.
Have I ever told you, off topic a little bit here, there was, it was probably the event you got Warlorded. I think we were ditching and you killed me 3 times with the same shot. And it was a lefty spin where you go high over your head and hit me right here. And that has been ingrained in my memory so much that I have newbies who are left-handed who like, what can I do better? I'm like, guys, I've showed you the 2 lefty shots I know.
Dislocate your shoulder like this.
Yeah. And I'm like, here, he does this. I don't know how he does it, but he does this. And it hit me right here 3 times.
That's amazing.
I love it. Beautiful sport.
Yeah. I'd say one thing about using off-meta weapons, it actually teaches you how to fight better. Like, because you can't rely on these. You can't rely on the typical concepts or short solutions to problems that you normally have with like your best combo or something. Like, but theoretically, all the things that you use in fighting should be applicable to every form of weapon. It doesn't matter. There's a Musashi. Yeah, Musashi says, basically, it doesn't matter what weapon you use. I can kill you with anything because the principles of fighting are all the same. It just depends on like which ones are kind of better than other ones. Like they're all the same stuff. Like polearm, I really love fighting with polearm because I try not to fight like any other way than I actually would with a polearm. And it's fun for team fighting and stuff like that.
I love poles. I hate pole in tournaments. But as far as like ditching or battlefield, pole is the most fun for me. I love it.
Polearm also looks pretty cool when you can like style on people. Like if you're on a ditch and like it's like 2 guys try to run up to you, one of them's got a sword and shield, one of them's got whatever, and you kill both the guys with the polearm, you're like, that's right.
I really enjoy pole because the supportive nature of it. If you fight that way, there's something about my job is to open and make opportunities for my teammates that I feel like most of the other ones, it's there, but it can be more present with a good pole fighter. And that's fun for me.
Yeah. And that type of, like you said, that type of thing allows you to support more. It builds more teamwork stuff, which you want more of that. Like we said earlier, like you want to be able to work with your team more often. That creates a better group experience for your park. Like when people are like, we don't like pole arms anymore. I'm like, at what point did we decide we didn't like pole arms anymore? It's not like most people suck with pole arm. I don't know why you have an issue with fighting pole arm. You could just use a kite shield. Like you just block your leg. But most people are bad at fighting. They have a strap medium shield. Like I can't block my legs. I'm like, get better equipment or something. I don't know. Yeah. They're like, learn to move around, whatever. But using polearm and just at your park can help people fight together and like do stuff. That's a huge thing. And it's battlefield awareness because if you get caught out with a pole, like on the end of a line, they're gonna kill you. Yeah, you're done. And so you gotta pay attention more. All right, let's see. Well, does this one all show up? I feel like you go one or both ways as a seasoned Amtgard. Your gear gets hella better at the top line linen garb, handmade, time authentic, noble, or you wear silly costumes because you've already maxed out your other classes to have fun with it.
I like it.
Kinda. Yeah. I usually see people like when they get knighted, they get super sweet garb and they're like, they become a real Larper. They're like, everyone gifted me these tunics and other things like this. Like, I have fancy garb now. And they take on the responsibility, like, I have to be a force of change for this game. Wear good garb. That has been given to them. Which happened to me. But then there's other people like, I got knighted in my Stargate tunic. And you're like, why? Why did you do this to me?
Feelings on Battlemaster, good, bad. I'll add, do you like it as a 5th belt? Would you prefer it as under sword? We've got 8 minutes in the rest of the podcast.
I think it's good. I think it's good we have Battlemaster because it is nice for people to pursue a masterhood in team fighting. I like the way they structured it and made it as quantifiable as possible. I like that I feel conflicted about it because I like that they added Paragon to it, where it's like, you know, you get X Paragons, you get Masterhood. At the same time, I feel like it's going to make people who pursue Paragon even more competitive and cheaty. Not cheaty, but like just not people fun to play battle games with. But like, who am I to talk? Like, I'm sure there's points in my game when I play that people don't like playing Amtgard with me. So it's whatever. But I feel like it's going to be a lot more people playing the not fun versions, but effective versions of their class, like a wizard with Ice Ball and Shatter or something like that. I wish we would have, I think they put it in the proposition for Battlemaster that like you need to look at these different vectors when considering somebody for Masterhood, which was super cool. I really like that. So I'm generally in favor of Battlemaster. I think it's better than having one of the proposed things was team fighting with like, if you win a team tournament together or something like that. Like, I don't like that because then someone can just get carried. Like, I also like that it's separate from Warlord and Sword Knight. Because, well, the primary reason being that I don't feel like players who compete in this different vector should be compared to another vector. Like, that's not really fair. It's not really fair to new Masterhoods either. Imagine the first sword Battlemaster wasn't good at fighting. And then if they hypothetically if they made it a part of Warlord, they go, yeah, but you're not a real Warlord, you suck. Like, how that would not make that person feel bad. And everyone go, well, maybe Warlords shouldn't be so toxic. And you're like, it's not. That's just how people think about stuff. Like, that's just how it is. I don't know how to describe it. It just wouldn't be fair to them. And people did it back in the day when you had Warlord Sword Knights and you had Sword Knights who were not Warlords.
Griffins or whatever.
Yeah, they're just like, those guys are Sword Knights, but they're not Warlords. And like, that's just how people thought about it. Also, another thing why I like it separated, a lot of people say like, well, they're both fighting, so they should be the same thing. They should both be Sword Knights. I disagree. And usually they say, well, all the crafting masterhoods go under Serpent. I'm like, yeah, of course. And the reason is they compete in the same vector. Like all Master Owls, Master Dragons, Master Garbers compete in the same tournament. You go to an Arts and Sciences tournament, however you perform in that, you're judged equally, right? They're judged literally in the same way. Therefore, I'm fine with them being Serpent Knights because it doesn't matter if you're a Master Garber, Dragon, or Owl. You can teach other people how to participate in A&S tournaments in the same way because you guys all did the same stuff together. But Sword Knights and Warlords do not train in the same way that Battlemasters and Knights of the Fray. They just don't. They're not the same. There's some crossover. Like there's some people who are both really good at both those things. But like you said earlier, those people are not really the same people anymore. I think back in the day, it probably would have been a little bit closer because the people who I can think of who are good at battle gaming and fighting are Manimal and Tugan and Hades. And I say back in the day. But back then battle gaming was more of the focus than tournament fighting was. Yeah. It's mostly like you got good at battle gaming because that was the thing that everyone did and it was really fun. And then someone's like, I want to get my warriors. I'm going to go compete in these tournaments now. Fighting was not the primary thing for a lot of people. It was mostly battle gaming. So I'm a huge fan of Battlemaster. I guess I was supposed to get my Battlemaster at the Bridge Wars, but I wasn't there. Yeah. So it is what it is.
Congratulations.
Yeah. that's what Dead Soon told me. I was like, okay, I'll just wait till March. It'll be fine. Our fighting company is planning on celebrating people getting Battlemasters together. Cool. I think Navarin and Manimal and myself and Smurf all got our Battlemasters, and I'm like, we're gonna have a festival, like a celebration together. Yeah, we're gonna make a cool thing of it. You should. That's just part of our company thing or whatever. So yeah, Vaughn, I'm pretty happy about Battlemaster. That's awesome. Well, sir, I really appreciate you coming on and spending an hour and 55 minutes chatting with me on this. It was a good time. In the couple of minutes that we have left here, you have anything you want to plug coming up soon, or any last minute thoughts that maybe I didn't ask?
that you want to get out there, use the platform as it were, before we sign off?
So coming up in March, I'm the Warcraft for the Rising Winds March event. One of the big things one of the concepts that I'm trying to execute on is player engagement and player expectation. A lot of people come to events and they go, it's just an event, I expect typical event stuff. I'm going to go hang out with my friends. A lot of people recently have gotten in the habit of just going to events and not really, they don't have a plan to do anything. Like, they don't have a plan. Like, I'm going to compete in these, I'm going to go play these games. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do that thing. They kind of just show up and they're like, it's the same humdrum stuff. So one of the things that my team is working on is setting appropriate expectations. And I want players to come to this event knowing what they want to do and knowing that they're going to have fun at the event. So there's some things to watch out for. We're like, I'm going to be doing developer videos, basically where I'm going through the battle games. I'm like, hey, this is the stuff that we're doing. This is the stuff how I'm basically creating a bunch of fun ways to trick people into engaging in our content. One of the things that we're going to do that's really fun is that I got approval for this week, so I'm going to talk about it. So our team is making a book of event specific items like trinkets, talismans, relics, stuff like that. And the thing is if you make the match, so if you show up the gate and look the part, and I'll describe what look the part is, and you make the magic item that's listed in the book, you can use that the whole weekend. So an example would be like, if I say look the parts, garb pants, top, bottom, and an extra piece of item. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's a gold satchel or something, that's your look the part. Now, if you made a monocle of True Sight, for instance, I don't know how you would make that. If you bought on Amazon, if you make it or you buy it, I don't care how you get it, and you bring it to the event and wear it in the battle game, you can use that, whatever. Cool. So if someone has a monocle and they have it on them, they can use it as a magic item. That's one of the ways we're creating player engagement. A part of that is one of the magic items we're going to make is your park banner or a kingdom banner that will confer a bonus to your team if you bring it out to the field. I love it. So if you have your park banner, like if you're from Tyrant's Thorn, I don't care if you guys are part of the game or not. If you come to the Tyrant's Thorn, you have your park banner. It has to be on a standard. It has to stick into the ground. Maybe your party gets everyone in that battle game with you, like on your team, gets like Song of Power or something. Cool. As long as you're within like 20 feet of the banner. That's sick. So one of those things is like, well, I want players to go to their park. How do I get players from your park, all the players from your park, to come to this event? Yeah. That's what I really want. It's also working on Spring Muster. So coming off of Spring Muster, I'm like, I want all your new players. I want every single one of them to come to the event. And I want them to have a reason to come to the event. A lot of people, like I said earlier, they don't have a reason to come to events besides I can hang out with my buddies. I want new players to have a reason to come to this event, have it to be really fun. So I was like, what's one thing I could do? Oh, what if I told people they can make their park banner? Some newbie's going to see it like, guys, what's our park banner? What's our park banner, guys? And that's going to create a conversation at their park. And they go, I'm going to make our park banner. This is what it does. And everyone goes, oh, that's freaking sweet. I want to go to the event because we made a park banner together. Another part of that is I have my team of guys, my shadows, go to parks in their region, find out what their park relics are. And we're going to try to add those into the rule book. Cool. Or into the event book. Yeah. So like, because then you have to learn about your park's history. And like, because people don't quest anymore, right? Like what were the quest items back in the day? An example was like one of the specific magic items from Blackfire Pass is called the Black Razor, which I think is from a Dragonlance novel, but it's a wound skill short sword all the time. And like if someone learned about that, I'm like, all right, that's a trinket. It's a short sword, and 2 times per game you can get wound skill or something like that. Like I want players to bring the cool essence of their park and engage in it and bring it to the Kingdom event with them. Right? I want to create this engaging fabric together. But that's just one aspect of what we're doing. I plan on having a pretty cool end game raid boss, basically battle game that involves an exercise ball and a RC car. That's the plan. Hopefully, I'll tell you about it when the podcast is over. But that's the plan. So hopefully we have a sweet March event. I'm cool. Part of it is trying to get my master smith basically, and I have 8 smiths right now, and I'm like, I really want to challenge myself as a smith and create, what smiths do. They make engaging experiences for people. So like, how do I make the coolest possible thing that's going to be successful and it's not too complex to fail. To get players to come to the event and play Amtgard together. That's what I want people to do. I just want people to come play Amtgard together. I don't want them to like sit in their camps all weekend. Doing nothing and vaping. I want them on the field fighting.
Called out.
Saracens. But I want them to come play Amtgard together. That's cool. What I want to do. So
that sounds awesome.
That's all I got.
If that will be which weekend in March?
It's tentative for March 20th.
March 20th. That is Kingdom of the Rising wins their March event. If that sounds fun for you, you should travel in for it. If you're in the Rising Winds, go to it. It'll be sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, sir, thank you very much for being on. Everybody, this was Warlord, Sir Raven the Swift. I'm St. Godric. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.